No one knows. No one knows. We all woke up in a upside down, turning inside out, like we've all been led astray. We've been standing on the outside in, trying to find our friends, like we're all just castaways. Feel like we've been missing out.
In the name of Jesus, the Son given to us by the living God, I stand and put on the whole armor of God. I gird my waist with truth, that no falsehood shall bind me. I take up the breastplate of righteousness, that my heart remain pure in all teachings. I shod my feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, that every step I take is ordered and firm. I lift the shield of faith to quench every dart of doubt, fear, and deception. I place upon my head the helmet of salvation, that my mind be guarded with clarity and wisdom. And I wield the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, sharper than any sickle, dividing spark from husk, soul from shadow, light from illusion. I declare, I am anointed to teach the master of faith, wisdom, and discipline, the three pillars that all nations honor. I am called to guide many through the threshing floor, where husks of limiting belief fall away and the pure spark is gathered into God's storehouse. I will not teach in my own strength, but by the Spirit, that every word be fire redefined, every lesson a vessel strong enough to carry the light. Where there is bondage, I loose it, and where there is illusion, I break it. Where there is spark hidden under husk, I reveal it. Let my teaching not create dependency, but sovereignty. Let the oil of anointing flow, the bread of truth nourish, and the sickle of discernment cut clean. For the harvest is ready, and I stand armored, equipped, and chosen to labor in the master's field. And so it is.
We're filming. Can I call back?
And welcome.
Welcome. Hello, you guys.
It's great to be here again.
And it's wonderful to be back.
Thank you. I love those prayers. So I want to jump right into this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Open. Nope, not okay.
Oop. There we go.
Yellow. Today we are covering the Swan. Okay, cool. Today's episode is called The Swan, the Wolf, and the Fallen Ones. This is a presentation that we have talked about putting out for several years now. And we were waiting for it to be the right moment. We were having to explain a couple things first. So if you are not familiar with us, Rikileaks definitely goes into the lore of fiction that has been played to millions, because that means it is predictive programming. And just like Galadriel does up with, usually truth gets warped and warped over the centuries, and it turns into a myth and just fiction little stories. But humans have a really good way of keeping these stories alive just by retelling them. So this is going to be a vampire episode. I have already made 3 zombie episodes, and I have spoken a lot about vampires in many of my parasitic health videos. So this is the first time we're actually sitting down and doing the only vampire movie I can watch, which is Twilight.
And how could you not talk about vampires when you're talking about parasites, right? I mean,
we're going to get into that. There is definitely a huge link between teeny tiny little worms, serpents. There's actually, let's start off with that. There's 6 million types of parasites, and each parasite has 5 different life cycles. So 30 million different versions of parasites, okay? There's only like 6,000 or 3,000 species of snake. So the word serpent, if used in any books, literally is going to mean parasite over, like probably it wasn't a snake in the garden. It was probably a worm in an apple. We know that they do some damage. So let's get into some of the scenes and we'll see where we go from here. We are not idolizing or advocating to idolize any vampires. So to us, this type of immortality goes against our beliefs. Just throwing that there. But I've been scared of doing this like talk because people are like, oh, we don't want you, like they think that we're trying to idolize these vampires. And a big enemy way of doing things is to kind of have people not look at the truth. So they just tell us not to do it. But oh, I spelled downfall wrong. But yeah, if we expect symbolism to be their downfall, we have to find out what the symbolism is.
Yeah, we can't just call everything satanic and not really understand the basis of how it's satanic or why it's satanic, and just blanketing things with the Satanist label. It doesn't really work. I mean, Satanists use toilet paper, they use fireplaces, cast iron skillets, gym equipment, yet those things aren't satanic just because they're being used by all these really bad people. And the pattern there is that just because it's being used by evil people, it doesn't make it intrinsically evil. And a big point, it doesn't matter. If we believe in the symbols, they do. The enemy does. There's, kind of the bright side of this talk is that, there are kind of, as you would say, vegan options when it comes to vampires. It's not all complete destruction of the human body or soul. Some are, tragically lost. And
we'll get into that.
We do get into that. So if hundreds of thousands of conservative students read up on the Marxist manifestos to just avoid it from happening again, you can hear out the symbology. I mean, we're going to get into the covenant and blood and how they relate. You'll see the character Bella, her transformation is the blood covenant, which is, the false eternal life outside of God's promise. And you can compare that to the new covenant in Christ's blood in Luke 22:20. We see vampirism becoming an anti-sacramental sort of theme, and it's a counterfeit communion. It's not real. It's kind of a cheat. So when you go for immortality as idolatry, you're going to run into this vampirism, worshiping the, worship of eternal flesh. And biblically, immortality apart from God is idolatry. And we see that in Genesis 22:24. Even in Hermetics, it's chasing husk over spark. And we're going to get into that a little bit. Those of you who have already kind of picked up on what the theme is here, you're going to be surprised.
And that's true. I was surprised doing, like, the reason I haven't done this video, this talk, is because it doesn't matter what we believe. This is what Stephanie Meyer is explaining. And when you first hear it, you're like, what the heck? But then it's one of those things, there's too many coincidences that it's like, okay, this is kind of weird. We need to look into it. I really do not pay attention to most, like, I've seen Interview with a Vampire. I've seen a couple little things here and there. Oh, House of Dracula. You covered it 4 years ago.
Yes.
And it was a 1945 Bram Stoker's Dracula, and he's a scientist. And I was already talking about parasites being vampires then. We had no idea about where the movie was going to go. And like, it's audible when we're watching the movie because you guys watched it online. And
we'll leave a comment so you guys can follow. But I remember that. And it was because it was an older film. I think back in
1945.
Yeah, in 45. And so you think about 1945, and I always go back to the fact that, we just didn't have in society the same access to information. We're going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but for them to come up with that sort of a plot line that we never really see Dracula as more of a, kind of benevolent entity. He's always just kind of just depicted as evil or misunderstood. He was
showed him as a scientist, and he found out that he was like trying to figure out why he was a vampire.
Right.
He checked his blood, or he checked something, and he realized there was a parasite
inside of him, and then he wanted rid of it.
But like right when he realized there was a parasite in him, like there was another storyline going, and like Frankenstein ruined everything. So it burned everything down. It burned all his research. But like technically,
They were talking about it.
Yeah, he was like he had just come to the realization of his own like kind of demise.
Which makes you feel like we really are in Twilight, which, by definition is the space between realms, the time right after the darkest point of the night. And when birds begin to sing, Twilight, a term that often invokes gentle transitions between day and night, it symbolizes the liminal space between distinctive realms, and it can represent that ethereal boundary of life and death, which is kind of aluminum-like, right? It's kind of a reflective void where the familiar and the unknown converge, creating that mystical threshold filled with wonder and contemplation. So we have to remember that there's an infinite number of milliseconds between 0 and 1, which is a good analogy that not everything really as, when you see it as what we're taught, or you see things for what you're told they are, right? The 0, 1, 2, but you can actually count between 0 and 1.
And people know this, like everyone, when you're not having a good time, when you're in school, when it's like you're counting down the hours, when we've all been really, really bored, or goodness forbid, if you heard horrible news and you're in the ER, it feels like it takes forever for the seconds to go by. And that's when people say time, it's all about perspective. And then when you're having a great time, it just flies by. So we all know that you can kind of make a very short amount of time feel like a lot or not. And that's all based on perspective.
Or even like kind of like money when you're rounding up numbers, like 5.25%. It's 5.26%. Like you can always go a little bit higher, but that's kind of what we're talking about. So again, that's the Twilight being the space between realms of reality, fiction. Stephanie Meyer, with her Mormon roots, she doesn't, again, we just want to bring this up. It doesn't matter if you, the listener, or you, the audience, believe it. It matters that the people who we might be trying to fight against or navigate against, they believe in these things. They believe in the bloodlines. They believe in O negative, RH negative themes. They do. They accept these things as truth, right? I mean, they put it everywhere for us to make it known.
It's usually part of their religion. It's usually the whole thing with symbology is that these people have to let us know what they're doing to us beforehand. There's a lot of weird stuff about here in the Southwest, Native Americans being taken. Oh, yeah. A lot of women, Native Americans, are taken and go missing. And the idea is that they're usually O negative or RH negative. And the idea is you can take babies and place them into them. Also, there's a lot of things said about O negative or O bloodline and RH negative bloodlines having certain gifts, and we'll get to that later. So as far as the human slave trade goes, you really do have to talk about the real life existence of vampires, because they blame shit on aliens. When you go out and you find a bunch of cattle being drained of blood, they're like, oh, the aliens, and everyone's like, oh, aliens. And
it's never
aliens, you guys. Yeah. Frankenfurter was a Transylvania transvestite. He was not an alien, but people love to make him seem that way. And I bet they're not kicked off of Twitter, the people who are saying this shit. So we're going to go into this. I heard some of Stephanie Meyer's parallels, and it made me mad. And that was definitely my cognitive dissonance. And then if you just hear her out, there's a little bit of spark in every fiction, and there's a little bit of lies in every nonfiction. So if we can like sort through the lies from the truth,
right,
I think she's on to a little bit of something, even though I'm not saying she's 100% true.
Well, I want to make a point, but it's too soon, but it'll make sense for the viewers and the listeners later. And then honorable mention that also Stephanie Meyer, she's really well known for the Twilight series.
We'll do it later. No, just wait till the slide. There we go.
So the host is one of hers, and it came after Twilight,
a couple of years, yeah.
Which is odd, but again, following the same themes. We also have The Lair of the White Worm, make it very explicit references to vampires, serpent, worm, draining life, sucking to ancient parasites. what is the Sloth Boys song, Vampires Are Parasites, taps into that same core truth. And we see it all across myth, books, films, music. Vampires and parasites are less aristocratic seducers, and they're more like kind of like worms that are feeding off of each other's essence. They don't really want to completely destroy because they'll have nothing, but they want to take the life force that we have naturally and rob us or others of that. And that archetype warns against powers that consume life without creating it, social, spiritual, or even literal. And there are a ton of examples here. Just,
they all talk about worms being the vampires. The Host was literally written by Stephanie Meyer. So Stephanie Meyer has only written about vampires in our world and parasites taking over humans. So they're both really the same topic, kind of different ways. And everything else shown here, it's exactly the same exact thing. And I came to it myself, and then you kind of realize other people have been saying it forever.
And it's not that they're just using parasites as a driver for the plot. There's a pattern. There's a message about the dangers of these things that are hidden from us. So we're not told about them very often.
I might put this actual part in the video, but I've always noticed this. There's a really awkward. The entire movie of Twilight is awkward. Okay, it's a very awkward movie. But there's a specific. They're liberals. They're in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, it's awkward. You have this scene where a little boy is like, "Oh my God, a worm! Bella, look, a worm! Ha ha ha!" And the second later, you see, as you can see here, Edward coming into frame, going, "Hey, Bella." So, like, I even think that was a very manufactured.
Like kind of like a subtle.
They're
hint.
letting you know.
I wonder if that was even in the book.
I don't know how it would be. Yeah.
All right, so we got to talk over. For those who may not know the vampire lore, there's something called a swan, and it was a coincidence that Bella Swan came with that name. And I got to get rid of this pop-up because it's bugging me, folks. So there's an Indian myth that the swan, or the hamsa, is a sacred soul, right? Birds are able to move between realms of life and death, and a swan can glide across these cosmic waters, even the dark river of Yama, the Lord of Death. And unlike ordinary creatures, the swan separates milk from water, which symbolizes its power to discern truth from illusion, much like what we want you guys to be able to do. And because of this purity, it can cross the death river into the afterlife without being bound by karma's weight. So we can see this correlate in the Vedic and the Upashandic teachings. The Paramahasha, the supreme swan, is the liberated soul, which rises freely across the waters of mortality, carrying divine light beyond death's shadow. And why this is important is because the swan archetype weaves through Bella Swan. We even see references to Elizabeth Swan from the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy that was produced by Disney, Jerry Bruckheimer, huge heavy hitters, and the Odette, also from the Swan Lake story that's told, it's famous, and just carrying this kind of mythic sync of transformation, death, and resurrection. In the Indian lore, the Hamsa crosses Death's River, which echoes Bella's passage from the fragile mortal that she was in the first book, spoiler alert, to this eternal spark later on in the series.
It's a false spark, but
yes, and we'll get to that. But it does still come up.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Swan too, in the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, mirrors the Swan Maiden entering and returning from Davy Jones' locker, which is the underworld, call it purgatory, what you will, and then being reborn as kind of the queen of both sea and afterlife. She was pretty much promoted to station to fight against tyranny after coming back from the underworld. Odette of Swan Lake and Swan Princess embodies that kind of captive swan bound by enchantment and shadow and captured by a bat-like figure, foreshadowing vampire motifs, which is pretty crazy. I don't think they were being too on the nose with it, but the captor parallels Dracula, binding her purity into darkness until love redeems her. And these three Swan Maidens, just examples, show one continual archetype. It's the feminine soul crossing the liminal waters, tested by captivity, shadow, and death itself, yet always rising luminous. And the swan becomes this universal emblem of initiation, liberation, and this internal passage beyond the dark river. And that's really more of quite a beautiful take on this, and just how it's all tying together. But there's also more to a swan, isn't there?
Well, I want to go back to Elizabeth Swan on Pirates of the Caribbean. We did the Pirates of the Caribbean episode last year. I think I even called it part 1 because there was a lot I didn't get to.
There's a lot.
The very first Pirates of the Caribbean, if you know vampire lore, the idea of how vampires came to America was this idea that when vampires lived in Europe, they were literally forced to live in the catacombs, the graveyards, all seem to have these like tunnel systems. So it was known that all throughout Europe and places, these vampires were forced to retreat underground. That's why they always connect them with graveyards, because that's where they were kind of cast away to.
Yeah.
And then people found the New World, America. They started coming over to America slowly but surely over 100 years. The vampires found out about this and they were like, oh, this great land, we can live free. And they took it as they could live free in America. We'll get more into this with the Civil War. But the idea is when they were coming to America, they were like, look up right now, vampire pirates. Vampire pirates is a huge, huge story that can't be shut out. A lot of people talk about this phenomenon of, a ship would leave with a couple hundred cargo passengers to the Americas, and only a few people would be left when they arrived at port. And Pirates of the Caribbean, they don't necessarily come out and say, oh, these are vampire pirates, but they do show the Black Pearl having immortal cursed men on board. There is a deleted scene where the reason that the Black Pearl was cursed was because he was made by a trading company to move human slaves. And Captain Jack's like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he was taken out and burned. And that is supposedly what happened. So in that story, the stories that do involve vampires, a lot of vampires, it wasn't their choice to change, and they were human first. Let's go to the next slide.
Right.
So really quick, just more about swan maidens. There are Slavic swan maidens. They're actually called Vila on Harry Potter, and I think Harry Potter did the best version. They don't really explain it too much on the movies, but they really go in depth in the books about these swan maidens. They're not witches. They're a different blood type. They're shape-shifting women who travel between worlds, bound to water and fate, sometimes helpers, sometimes captives. They embody the archetype of the soul caught in the matter, yet longing to return to the luminous. Winged state Grand Duchess Anastasia and her sisters were often nicknamed the Little Swans in diaries and correspondence. Their elegance, whiteness, and innocence made by the swan was a fitting family emblem, and in folklore terms, Anastasia's myth as the lost princess who survived parallels the swan maiden archetype, vanishing into the waters of death, yet rumored to return. The whole of Anastasia is apparently when the Romanovs were taken to the dungeons and killed, apparently there wasn't the proper amount of skeletons found in this wreckage as the amount of family members. There's like 2 missing skeletons. So the idea of Anastasia and someone else, or at least Anastasia not being shot, that's why we keep having this story that she is not dead and not alive. It's this liminal state. Fleur de la Cour was the Vila. She was only like 25% Vila on Harry Potter. You either loved her or you hated her. Bitches were jealous of her. She was gorgeous until she got mad. When she got mad, she became inflamed, nasty, like basically a really ugly phoenix, fiery swan bird. It was crazy, very scary. So
if you didn't know, now you do, that the swan as more than just a symbol, but it's a theme. that's going to be reoccurring, and it's just important to pick that up when we're talking about vampires right now. I think it's on the next slide. People of Arizona is supposed to be tan.
Nah, bitch. Not Virgos. I know 4 different Virgos live in Phoenix, including myself, and none of us are tan. None, because we don't leave the house. Okay.
All right, so let's jump into, again, so in Stephenie Meyer's book Twilight, there's even more references when you look, kind of hinting at what she's possibly explaining, but these tribes, the actual lost tribes of Israel are represented in the book with an actual Native American tribe that she puts as one of the friends in the book to Bella. But the characters in Twilight reflect these biblical themes and figures, and we're going to kind of run through some of these just to point them out for you guys. The first one notably being, everyone knows Jacob, right? I forget the actor's name right now; it's escaping me. Taylor Lautner, yes. Jacob Black represents the patriarch Jacob. He's wrestling with nature, loyalty, and symbolized by his last name, which hints at that hidden or burnt Israel. And
what we mean by that, read Isaiah 43.
Yeah, check that. So Isaiah 43 says, "Their hot blood is purged Israelite fire."
It said, so especially Mormons out of everyone believe that everyone always said they were black people, and they were like, no, they're dark skinned, but they're not black natives. They are, and Stephenie Meyer here explains she believes they are the natives of Americas. And we have Seth, one of the members, who is also a biblical character.
Yeah, most likely reference after Seth, who was Adam and Eve's son. And he in the book embodies purity and bridges various different factions during the books and the trials, which show themes of baptism and the covenantal cleansing. Paul is a character in the book, which of course echoes Saul of Tarsus. Paul in the book is pretty aggressive, quick to temper, which mirrors the biblical Paul's transformation. You have Sam, how do you say his last name? Sam Yulee. He's kind of the alpha. He related to Samuel, the prophet, and leads the tribe, maintaining order amidst chaos throughout the books. You have Leah Clearwater, which alludes to Leah, Jacob's unloved wife, which parallels feelings of rejection and restraint. You have some smaller supporting characters, Quill and Embry. Quill suggesting the writing of the Torah, perhaps, and Embry represents rebirth and renewal. And then we see the wolf symbolized as a scorched Israel, reflecting themes of exile and transformation, embodying a destiny of the covenant. It looks like Meyer said Stephenie Meyer, like, they're not werewolves in the traditional sense, which, they're not lichened. Which, again, if I know most of you listening are probably aware of, the werewolves and versus vampires and that whole thing that got pushed around with the Underworld series. Those are separate things. These are shape-shifting guardians, right? These people in this Native American tribe in the book can shapeshift at will after reaching a certain point. So they're not werewolves, just shapeshifters. And that is important.
They're not bitten. They don't turn on the full moon.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah.
Yes. So that comes into a divine power almost too. So we have, we call it the tribe of Jacob, which is represented here in the book.
He does have 2 sisters too. We don't see in the movies. In the book, he has Rachel and Rebecca. Those are also biblical names, so interesting to know. She went hardcore, making sure we knew that the entire tribe of the natives was apparently the Israelites. To her, just saying.
Yeah. So then, you also have the vampires. We have this proverb 30:14 speaks of the people whose teeth are swords and their jaw teeth knives to devour the poor from the earth. And it does, it's echoing vampiric feeding, right? And according to scripture, the vampiric archetype, the blood drinker, the predator, it cannot be redeemed or serve humanity willingly, but God may allow their presence as warnings, tests, or even to break greater evils. And humanity is called to resist not partner with them, right? And that's important for a lot of different entities out there, even just in the spiritual world, where it's really not our place as human beings, even if you feel like you're of a different planet, but you're here now embodying a human body. It's not your place necessarily to partner with entities outside of their will or God's will. Are vampires the fallen angels? Or even in this instance where we're making these biblical kind of parallels, are they the fallen Israelites? Possibly from the tribe of Judah. And I mean, check this out. With vampires, Lilith being, you could call her the first vampire, was never human, right? She was more of a succubus, demon entity here.
Mm-hmm. Edward and everyone, I mean, every vampire we know of was a human, and then they were turned, yes, through Lilith's help. She was the first, and we'll go into that later because they do kind of hint on that on the third book. But all these people who were turned vampire, they were people. So therefore, that doesn't make sense going, vampires are fallen angels. No, they're not. They were never an angel. They were human. Yeah. And if you look up fallen humans in the Bible, we do know there are fallen humans in the Bible. The fall of man is Genesis 3. Adam and Eve disobey God, expelled from Eden, and bring death into the world. Romans 3:23, for all who have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Romans 5:12, by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Micah 7:8 and Psalm 37:24 speak of falling, but also being lifted back up by God. What did I want to say? With knowing this, yes, this parasite makes them devour living blood. However, in most vampire films or movies or whatever, there's this idea that they have the ability to eat blood or a blood-like substance without killing humans. And this is where the vegan vampire idea comes into play. So on Twilight, they basically eat animal blood instead of human blood. So they're not even bloodletting. They don't have an adrenochrome like True Blood does. True Blood does have a drink that is legitimately a synthetic blood alternative that will satiate and keep these vamps alive. So why was Jesus made human? To clear everyone's sin. That's a big thing with these Abrahamic religions. A thing about forgiveness, accepting forgiveness, knowing that we'll get into the forgiveness aspect. And I'm not the one saying to forgive vampires. To me, that's idolatry. I'm not telling anyone to do that judgment, but there are certain things I wouldn't be surprised if we're being lied about. How are the vampires fallen angels? They weren't angels to begin with. They were men. They were fallen men. So what does the Bible say about fallen men? And we do get into this Jesus theme, which of course, she's Mormon. That is a sect of Christianity, like it or not. She does bring in Jesus parallels. Of course, other people are going to say, it's Osiris. But the river Styx takes 3 days to travel through, no matter who you are, apparently. It's in every single religion that there is a river from here to the afterworld, and it takes about 3 days. So just because someone took the interstate and it takes everyone who jumps on the interstate an hour to get from here to the other side of town, don't get pissy just because everyone's taking the same road.
Right. Well, even that, but there's multiple roads to get to where you want, and there's not just one way. And that's, again, I know, these themes about, the biblical references, and vampires, and Stephanie Meyer, and how she's, chose to approach a lot of these things. That's what we want to keep you guys tied up in, and we want to have you guys look at that. So we've talked about the vampire archetypes. We've talked about the swans. We've talked about how there's the tribe of Jacob.
Oh, I wanted to say something about that.
Yeah.
In the Bible and dogma from Smith, whatever. Anyway, there's this idea that angels cannot procreate. They cannot, no matter what they do, they cannot mix with human blood. That's also why I wanted to be like, are they fallen angels or are they fallen Israelites? Because fallen angels apparently can't mate with humans, meaning there will never be a half.
You can't have a hybrid.
So if there's fallen Israelites, or a demon influence, then they might be able to procreate with children. So throwing that out there, it's a maybe.
Well, and that still, yes, that makes me think of that even the fallen angels could have made it in such a way that they gathered the fallen humans and had them procreate, and they were overwatching that and made them suffer for their woes instead of them being able to procreate, right?
And that goes into like the stuff going on Jeffrey Epstein's island.
Yeah.
The whole series keeps talking about this lion and the lamb. Like there's this whole lion and the lamb phrase in Twilight that Stephanie Meyer keeps pushing. Edward as a fallen Judah lion, Bella as a sacrificial lamb, their love as a hermetic alchemy of opposites and a Kabbalistic echo of Chest and Guvera reconciliation. It warns of destruction but hints at prophetic harmony. If you are looking at these sources and you're like, oh my God, she's talking about the Cabal and she's talking about the Hermetic, these people believe in it. If you want to know the symbology, you have to be brave enough to look at the symbology. We can't want to know what things mean and steer clear of their teachings.
Right. You can't. Well, it's much more difficult to just force all the information through one lens, one belief system. So you can have your belief system, but you just also have to be open at the same time to look at other perspectives, other information, from almost like forensically. You know, how come these people choose to only follow the Kabbalistic echoes or their Hermetic principles or the rites of Freemasonry and everything that they do, and they discount everything just like the Word of God? They don't take the Word of God into account, but they seem to always follow their own path that overlaps everything that we have. And you can't lock onto it if you don't understand it. You have to look. You don't have to give in completely, but you have to be able to be willing to look, or at least glance, or in this instance,
you don't have to have it become your identity.
Right. Okay, so we talked a lot about, these different themes and how they kind of line up, but, if they're not fallen angels and they're not intrinsically evil, not all of them, and some vampires are just humans who didn't have a choice, are they all bad? No. And, you might be saying, how the hell are there ally vampires? We don't want to call them good per se, but it's still not true. Right. So we're going to bring up, again, we've talked about this in past videos, but the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter the book and comic, just reframing what we think we know about the Civil War more as a spiritual war where the Union's, quote unquote, good vampires are secretly aiding humanity against the predatory bad vampires. The Confederacy is shown as a husk empire feeding on slavery and blood, and Lincoln's allies, the immortal yet moral, represent sparks of truth, willing to protect freedom rather than consume it. And the hidden truth is that America's struggle for liberty was not only political, but also based in the occult. Vampires had by then embedded themselves in power, positions of wealth. They were in the plantations, driving the very economy that the innocent people of the South depended on, which feeded both on human flesh, and the nation's soul, really. The Union's secret brotherhood in the North, which guarded ancient knowledge, weaponized silver, right? They preserved archives of vampiric history suppressed from public record. And that secrecy ensured that humanity would believe that the war was only about politics, while in truth it was a war of covenants. And freedom versus enslavement, this theme of spark versus husk, we're going to get into in a little bit for you guys. The hidden group's main secret was that history itself has always been shadowed by the immortal predators, shaped empires. Not just, it's not all through the hands and toils of man. There are dark, sinister influences that work tirelessly and persist to drive the nations and, in people's minds what they want instead. There was a speech that Lincoln gave in Springfield in 1859 where he described that financiers and monopolists as, quote, vampires feeding on the honest toil of the people. And in some of the debates with Douglas, Abraham warned of, quote, the spread of slavery's vampire power, which is draining the republic. In some Civil War letters, Lincoln compared spectator profiteering off soldiers' needs to vampires in our midst. These metaphors, they were common in the 19th century, but vampire meaning more than just parasitic powers feeding on the lifeblood of the nation. It was an interesting theme to use. We all know,
nowadays,
not
back then.
Back then, yes. As weaponry, silver was alloyed into bullets and metals and presentation swords, even ceremonial ones. But through the lead was standard. The silver being used symbolically for honor and sometimes for supernatural protection. It was pretty odd that they had done a huge. The Union had relied heavily on silver back.
There was a silver shortage.
Yeah, they had called everybody in to send in their silver stocks to back the greenbacks, the paper money at the time. And there was a huge silver shortage during the war that fueled inflation and speculation about what were we really using it for. And just even for my historical listeners there, the death toll at some of these battlefields like Gettysburg, what was the true cause there? Is it really possible that Pickett's charge was just a bad call? Right? Was there more happening there? We'll probably never know.
It doesn't make, and we'll get more into the Civil War later. It just does. There's stuff that doesn't make sense because when you go to war, your soldiers are going to be the workforce, but the South didn't have a workforce the same way the North did because a lot of the Southern people were slaves in the workforce. Yeah. So all the farmers that, the North might have had other people, free men being, the South didn't have those. They're not sending their slaves out to fight the Civil War, who right. was fighting with the numbers that they were. And it's like, okay, there might have been, and I mean, Wolverine and his brother fought in the Civil War. They were obviously
movie reference, yes.
Yes. They were another form of like vampires or these beings that are not so much human, but very, very strong. Go on.
So, yeah, again, we couldn't not do this honorable mention about Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter, without talking about it. Okay, so let's go back real quick. So this is what I wanted to bring up earlier when we were first introducing you all to swans when it comes to vampires. So you have this in True Blood. These sweet-blooded mortals are kept alive as companions for vampires, and it's kind of this. This has come up from rumors in Hollywood circles. Princess Bride features this kind of half-bat enslaver representing a proto-vampire. But you have these vampires who are just going to kind of be like, hey, I like you, and I don't want to kill you, but I want to feed off of you. And in return, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to give you everything you want, and they treat you very well. And, in exchange, you let them drink from you instead of them having to take that primal urge and go out.
They don't kill them, they bloodlet from them.
Yes.
It's in a lot of different vampire lore. They show it on True Blood. None of the pictures are okay for here. They're called fang bangers. It's gross. There are story times still up on YouTube of people explaining, like back in 2007, going into parties and seeing very famous celebrities doing this to women. They're not killing the women, they're just drinking from the women. And like throughout the series, Edward is like, you can stay, like you can, I don't care about you getting old, bitch. I want your blood. Like you don't get it. I don't love you. So that's like a huge thing. It's a truce. It's not a covenant of marriage.
So keep that in mind. So when you think about, again, that's why we're saying it's interesting that Stephanie Meyer used Swan to represent Bella's character. It wasn't just oh, that sounds nice. There was a reason behind it. There's an example from the film.
Yeah.
So God's gift to humans, per the Bible. Quick review. Gifts of the Spirit in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, and Ephesians 4. We see these themes apply: wisdom, insight into divine truth, knowledge, faith, healing, miracles, prophecy, speaking God's message, discernment of spirits, telling truth from deception, angel from demon, speaking in tongues with unlearned language, interpretation of the tongues, teaching, exhortation and encouragement, leadership, mercy, all of these things are God's gifts to us, right? You know, strength and courage from Joshua 1:9, craftsmanship in Exodus 31:3, dreams and interpretation all the way from Genesis into Joseph in the book of Daniel.
Quite a lot.
It's over and over and over again, and people are missing this sometimes when you go through or you breeze through some of the gospel, where God had gifted us already with so much power.
I want to cover that. So in Harry Potter, we kind of sort of touch on this, where in Harry Potter, you have all the wizards, and then you have a couple humans now and then who have the gifts, and they are able to be called into Hogwarts. And Lily, which is Harry Potter's mom, she was a muggle. She was a human. And her sister was really, really jealous that Lily was offered to go to Hogwarts because she had these gifts, and her sister didn't. So there's this thing about not necessarily bloodlines carry the same gift, but in my personal experience, like if I had to guess, there's initiations or rituals that happen to a child, and that will unlock these heavenly gifts. I think it has to do with if the kid was baptized, if the kid was near death, if the person was a virgin. Now, virgin, we in 2025, we say the definition of virgin means, have you had your penis enter into a vagina? Have you had your vagina open up to a penis? That is not what everyone has used the word virgin in the past. The word virgin in the past has meant several different things and has been used several different ways. Virgin queen, we knew they had sex, but they never had a child. So someone who's never had a child could be a virgin. There's Hermetic teachings that say virgin means a woman who can complete her journey without having to spread her for hoping that her children will do it in the future. She is complete. She is finishing her bloodline's duty then and there. A Virgo, someone born between August 23rd through September 22nd, could be literally a virgin, which represents Persephone, who is an innocent young girl in Greek mythology who was human trafficked to the underworld. Virgin, in Macbeth, there is a virgin where Macbeth, a baby could not pass through a vaginal canal. He was instead taken out in a cesarean section. So all of these different little things could be initiations that bring on these gifts. So it's not just blood. It's also, did you have these other things happen to you? Okay. The second book, New Moon, abandonment, Edward Bella, trauma bonds happen, and a really big word on adrenaline. So Edward, what?
Well, so this is part of the Twilight series. This is the second book that we're talking about, and Stephanie is going to, she starts expanding on. She introduced us to, hey, I'm making some of these references, and I'm setting the stage for you. And then in the second book, she really drives it home. And so we're just finding out that Edward, kind of representing this demon, is abandoning Bella, which we can see as almost as the Gentile. And it's
she
funny that
considers herself a Gentile because she keeps calling herself the sheep or a lamb.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's referred to as the lamb, and that's going back to the biblical reference of the lion and the lamb of Judah. So when you interpret it that way, through that lens biblically, and you look at Jacob as the representation of the Israelites, you have the Gentile running to the Israelite, causing a strong bond. And the demon absence, the evil people invaded, bad vampires come to Washington and start to really mess things up, and that activates the tribe of Jacob to start fighting, to start protecting.
And what we mean by the bad vampires, there are just vampires roaming around, and because the Cullens had lived in Forks, Washington, that was their territory. No one was going to come and mess with them. We meet bad vampires in the last book. They know we're here now. Edward is scared away because his bleeding lady bled. I don't know how he dealt with her during her period, but she got a paper cut and all hell broke loose. So they just left her because it's easy to run away. And because they ran away, because they didn't have dominion over this land, really, really bad vampires came and started taking over the land. And these new vampires were not vegan. They were killing people. They killed plenty of people in the area because they were killing people. This was activating the tribe of Jacob to turn.
They wanted to go investigate. They wanted to find out what was going on, and they knew that Bella was mixed up with the Cullens and these vampires. That they didn't, they didn't see it the same way that Bella did, or even the readers get to. They're just like, hey, you're you're an enemy. So they think that when they start hearing about all these strange attacks happening, that it's the Cullens, and so they immediately jump to action to go figure out what's going on, and they get into a lot of trouble. So quick note about the U.S. patents that do exist. We talk about, adrenaline getting added with oxidizers and catalysts that then become, what we know, and not to get blocked, but the adrenochrome, often referenced as the oxidation product of adrenaline, and chemically, it's adrenaline that has been shifted into more of a reactive quinine-like state. So we see this in the second book. Bella begins to start craving adrenaline. She starts to seek out things that make her in danger, just because it'll make Edward's spirit kind of react to her to keep her safe. And she thinks that's how she's gonna just continue her life, just to live on the edge, to put herself in danger. It's really kind of ignorant, honestly.
So she keeps trying to kill herself. Of course, Alice, one of the vampires who has sight, they get confused. There's miscommunication. Basically, the Cullens think at a certain point in the second book that Bella died. It was a huge miscommunication. It was one of the tribe leaders, actually. So, I'm sorry. Basically, this makes Edward want to kill himself. So the only way a vampire can kill themselves is if they go to the Illuminati of vampires, the bad, bad, bad vampires, the deep state of vampires, and you basically ask them to kill you, and they do it the proper way. So remember, humans, God gave humans wisdom, prophecy, healing, miracles, tongues. Bella keeps trying to kill herself to keep a false spark alive. Why I keep bringing up the biblical gifts is because we just talked about the Volturi or the Illuminati. They're really equivalent to the Illuminati, if you ask me. They hide in the shadows under the staircase. A lot of people think of Freemasonry and they're like, Illuminati. It's like, no, technically the Masons are on top of the staircase and the Illuminati is hiding like little bitches under the staircase.
They're weak and fake, and it's a false front, really, if you look at it. And the Illuminati are a joke.
So that's the Volturi in this instance.
So then the third book of the series, Eclipse, which right now we're in an eclipse season at the time of recording this video.
2 different ones.
Which is pretty cool. So this movie follows more, the alchemical themes. Can you go into what those are? Really,
this was just for me to remind everyone. Every single play and movie has 3 acts. The reason it has 3 acts is the Negretto, Albedo, Rubedo, which is the dark night of the soul, coming out of the dark night of the soul, and the ending, whatever that is, including the return home. So it's a shortened version of the hero's journey, basically. So, but this particular third book really shows each changing act, and it's hard to watch because Jacob just took care of her and they fell in love, a friendly, really close love in the second book, and then she gets her man back. So not even a man, she gets her vampire back, and she takes her vampire back to Forks, and it's like, oh, sorry, don't need you anymore, Jacob. Oh wait, but I do. So she broke this kid's heart. She goes back to Forks with her vampire dude. Jacob's like, what the heck are you doing? Oh my gosh. And then in the background of all this happening, in the first movie, we met bad vampires. In the second movie, those bad vampires started moving in on forks, eating people. In the third movie, those bad vampires are creating a small vampire army of brand newborn vampires, which are really, really, like, vampires are not easy to contain as it is, but when they're like those first few months to years, they are animals. They cannot control their feelings, their hunger. They are just rampant. So the idea is that the bad vampires went to Seattle and bit a bunch of kids, and those kids became mini vampires, and killings went way, way up in Seattle. This reminds me of what we hear about going on around the world today. Even in Seattle in 2020, we had the Summer of Love, and obviously Chicago has 5 to 30 murders every weekend. So I want people to remember that this background thing is fighting. So why this is a problem is because the Cullens find out about it. They know that baby vampires are being made. This has happened in the past before. We'll get in a second. And it's hard because now the Cullens have to go to Jacob's tribe and be like, it's not us. We can help you kill these bad vampires. If they're going to be stronger than us, it's going to be a horde situation. We need to team up and fight alongside you. Go to the next slide.
So yeah, basically that you have to look outside your own belief system to challenge what's happening in reality. There's a character in the book, Jasper Hale. Quick highlight on his backstory. It really does parallel the kind of the hidden war idea from the Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter stories, where the Civil War was more than just politics. It's a battlefield for the nation's soul, and it was terrible. And Jasper in the book is portrayed as a Confederate soldier that's recruited into a vampire coven, and experiences firsthand how the immortal predators can exploit war and slavery for feeding grounds. And similarly, in the Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter books, the bad vampires embed themselves in the Confederacy, and they use slavery as a blood supply. And the Union vampires resisted that idea. And Jasper's transformation mirrors the occult layer that soldiers drawn into vampiric service, the wars are going to be prolonged by hidden powers, and the freedom entangled in a struggle against inhuman overlords. So what do we have here down listed? So do some references.
You don't have to read them, but it's all the different books, movies, fiction that explain, yes, vampires were fighting in the Civil War. There's quite a few different things out there that make this a
so again, for Stephanie to probably independently research that and then add that into her book as a backstory, we just look at that as a pattern. I think that's quite a coincidence. So she's trying to point to something why. Okay, so false sacrifice. This was a really good point, Alexa, that you had brought up, and something that kind of swayed me when you were talking about this, probably a year ago. But Bella, I just as an outsider looking into it, was like, what's wrong with what Bella did? She was in love, and she sacrificed her own self for to be immortal with somebody. Like, how romantic is that? Well, not really.
They explain it in the book. It happens so quickly in the movie that it does kind of look romantic, but in the book, the boys, the vampire boys, the Jacob tribe, they are knee deep in war plans, basically, to take out these baby vampires. And there's really no reason for them to tell Bella every single thing. Like, they just didn't. It wasn't a big ordeal. So there's this huge, it comes to this whole fight scene between the baby vampires that would start coming in and our tribe, plus the vampires, the good vampires fighting along us. And it's a really cringe thing that happens, and it's basically like Bella's like, I'm gonna help you guys, I'm gonna distract them over here, and she cuts herself so she starts bleeding so that the baby vampires go to her. And it really does mess up a divine plan. And later on, Edward and Jacob are like, you're retarded, how did you do that? We were trying to get them over here, we had something going on. And she's like, I didn't know, you didn't tell me. And we did see this happen in another movie. Last of the Mohicans. And the Last of the Mohicans, same kind of thing. The woman tries to, I don't know, I think her name's even Alice. She tries to kill herself at the end. She does kill herself at the end. And if she would have waited like 60 seconds, this guy came to save the day. But it was very womanly.
That was actually romantic.
Yeah.
Like the love of her life from the other tribe was killed, and then she didn't want to live without him.
Yeah.
So she jumps off the cliff. But
She
yeah,
didn't make it.
had she just waited, she could have, continued to live life. But she chose not to. She just, they're too quick. No 48-hour rule.
So why I brought this up is because when people don't know the full plan, when women do not know the full plan, they make harsh and moves that they might hurt themselves or other people later on. So to me, this is why the cue boards might have been made, to let people know there is a plan. And if you want to be smart enough, you can like put it all together. If you're not, at least you have some kind of faith that something is happening while this crazy shit is happening.
Instead of running out the door, guns blazing,
Yeah.
getting in the way versus, being where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Psalm 91, 1-4. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. Yeah, you made this presentation on Tuesday, 9/9/2025, which is also 9.
Yeah.
And we wanted to bring this up too, just while we're transitioning into the last part of Stephanie Meyer's book. But again, challenging belief systems and looking at things that we're told are intrinsically bad really are not. You've got to be able to look past that. You have to be able to look at both. You have to be able to be in the middle of the road. So this is an easy one, but for those of you out there who want to practice this on people who might be difficult one to talk about when it comes to spirituality, or they're just they pull out all the normal really basic little stops about
because they have
666.
fear. We're not making fun of them. I want to make that very clear.
But we have to point out that they do exist, and it's pretty easy it's your duty to spin this around on them so that they can learn. You have to literally, like we have at the bottom, you have to flip 666 into 999.
That's transmutation.
You have to. If you let people go around you and say, oh, well, 666 is the mark of the beast, it's evil. It's like, well, you have to stand and say, no, it's not.
We can transmute what is necessarily going on. It's almost like gang signs. Like the good thing about gang signs is they're marking their territory. So if you're fighting a gang, you know where they are. So it's when I see 666, I kind of think, we know where they are. We know where to fire because they're trying to mark their territory. We can flip that on its head, which is a big thing in Pirates of the Caribbean. And if we're talking about swans and everything, it's the liminal space and the flip. And in Twilight, there is an Alice, which of course represents Alice in Wonderland, where you have to look at the reflection of what's happening because we're living in a false reality. So whatever is happening or being said in this false reality, the opposite is actually true. A lot of people think of that as well when they're talking about 66299. So.
All right, so I think Breaking Dawn is a 2-part finale series.
The book's one, so I'm just calling it one.
Right, but it's important that just to bring up, again, when we're looking at these themes in the book, with Bella being represented as the Gentile, and Edward, the vampires,
possible demon,
as
possible
a demon,
Nephilim, like we don't know. So this is a really big part of Breaking Dawn is we find out a pregnancy occurs between Edward and Bella while she is still human. So I want to make this very clear because even the vampires in the book, when they find out about this, they're freaking out because we just learned newborn vampires, we can't control them. They're like animals. They're stronger than everyone. They're fast. It's scary. When kids, like literal children, like 3 years old, are turned into a vampire. So when people found that she was pregnant, this terrified everyone. Edward tried to do like abortion, technically, kind of, sort of, but they couldn't pierce her placenta. Like, even early stages, she was like, "You're not going to kill my baby." Everyone, there were other covens getting involved in it, trying to kill the baby. It was like people were scared of this demon spawn. Even the demons were scared of the demon spawn. Weirdly enough, she has the demon spawn, and Israel, Jacob, falls in love. He imprints with the demon spawn child. So, and the demon spawn child didn't end up being bad. It's like a chill kid, and it has its own telepathy gift, and it's not human, it's not vampire. It's a definitely half and half, and it can eat normal food or like human food, or it can have blood.
So again, just going back.
If you have kids, I would say, if they're watching at this point, I would have the kids go in another room, because this is a lot of speculation, and I don't want it to become anyone's truth, because this is a lot. You'll see where I'm getting. So, can you press the picture and delete it?
This?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let's read this.
Amps can't see their reflection. Their 6 o'clocks can be dangerous. Revelation 13:18 calls 666 the number of a man. That means it represents humanity in fullness. 6 is the number of creation. Man was created on the 6th day. 3 sixes equals the perfect creation, the body, soul, and spirit triad. Thus, 666 is not only a mark of corruption, it can symbolize the potential of humanity to reflect divine image fully into the material realm. So instead of fearing matter, embodying harmony, body, which is health, the soul, which is wisdom, and spirit, which is faith, you can also use 666 as a form of protection, as a seal of balanced creation against parasitic husks. You can use, against as a counterfeit detector. 666 reveals the mark of a corrupted system, right? We could all see where they use it. They use their symbology very in plain sight, right in the open for us to see if you can look for it. But it will also tell you that there's light workers there where imbalance hides, so that they can restore the order. In alchemy, good guys will flip 666 into 999. That's just a symbol of inversion and resurrection. When you look at it from a Hermetic and a Kabbalistic kind of point of view, the 3 hexagrams will equal the triple unity of the above and the below. In the Hermetic law and Hermetic teachings, 666 can represent mastery over polarity, rhythm, and correspondence in the earthly domain. While tradition really has demonized it, the number 666 can also mean perfect creation, balanced polarity, radiant love, and the fullness of man reflecting divine harmony. You guys will use it for cleaning matter, love, and balance from husks, turning into a feared mark into a sign of wholeness. Tell me more about this Washington, D.C. chessboard.
So, if you can press that. Okay. And the reason I show this is the Capitol building and its reflection into the water. And it's called a reflecting pool that we have in DC. They're asking us to look at the reflection. So when we do see marks of 666, especially in DC, there is a reflection that they want us to look at. I wasn't just saying that for no reason, but there is this idea, if you listen to people who are still uncensored on YouTube, allowed to post with no problem, they really, really push that the Washington, D.C. is they only look at it from the fear aspect. They're like, it's a chessboard. If you look at the streets of D.C., it's how you explain pieces moving, because the streets are in weird angles. Are you okay?
They're saying that the architecture was made intrinsically evil using the properties of 666, and that our entire is panic from the start, which is nonsense.
They're saying, yeah, so that's what they're saying. And they're explaining, like, if you look at a map of DC, you'll see the different structures. And literally in front of those structures are streets. So the idea is that these structures are the chess pieces and the streets are them moving to different parts. Now, the only thing with a chessboard is there's two teams at play. It's not just one team. So when people go, oh, this is happening, we're not saying it's not happening. We're just saying you have to look at the good team as well, not just the bad team. And then when there's a reflecting pool involved, that means we have to reflect on the other side of the coin. Okay. Oh yeah, I actually have it out here. So if you see it, the different city designs, I don't even know how to say his name, Pierre Elefante, the French-American architect, designed DC using sacred geometry and enlightened ideals. The grid of avenues, diagonals, and circles overlaid like a chessboard with the Capitol, White House, and Washington Monument as pieces. Black squares. This looks like the Masonic floor of any temple, Solomon's, but any lodge. And it's the duality of light versus dark, good versus evil, always in play. Washington's radial streets resemble moves. The Capitol is the king. The White House is the queen. Supreme Court is the bishops. The Pentagon is the knights. Monuments, obelisks are rooks aligned with as chess pieces. Citizens are the pawns. Freemasons were heavily involved in the founding of DC, which encodes Hermetic geometry, pentagrams, hexagrams, compass, and square designs. The chessboard city becomes a ritual space where political, spiritual, and occult moves are made. In Kabbalistic terms, the board symbolizes the tree of life reflected in the city, order imposed on wilderness. Biblical Hermetic warning, the game isn't just politics. It's about polarity and control. Chess teaches that both sides are controlled by the same hand. Now, I don't believe that because we can get rid of that. Hold on. Revelation style imagery casts DC as Babylon. Hermetically, it's also the temple floor, which initiates must learn to walk the black and the white path. That something that, of course, these secret orders try to justify their bad wrongdoings with, that you will hear over and over again. They have to learn how to be the bad guy in order to be a good guy. So if everyone goes, oh my God, they're evil, to them, again, it doesn't matter if you and I believe it, to them, what they are being told or what they are acting upon is this idea that you have to be the bad guy in order to be the good guy. We see this idea that the Volturi are the fallen thrones. Volturi mirror the Watchers and the Nephilim rulers of Enoch, or the fallen. I don't know if the Volturi in the movie, I didn't look this up, if they were ever human. I don't know if they're kind of like these demon incubi.
They're ancient.
They're ancient. But I don't know if they were ever human. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll have to look that up. Because they do kind of make them seem different than all of us. But why I keep bringing them up in all these gifts, the Volturi, which is also how I see the Illuminati, they really want humans with special gifts, because apparently in this universe, when you change them into a vampire, those gifts are magnified. So Alice, who is a prophet and a oracle, she can see the future. They really want Alice on their team because she can see the future. They really want Edward because he can read minds. They really want a lot of the Cullens tribe because they have these God-given gifts, which became more prominent when they became vampires. So they don't even want to kill the Cullens, even if this huge war kind of portrays and follows through with stuff. So really quickly, I wanted to talk about Bedazzled. Bedazzled is a really, really good movie. It's about it is going through tests and trials following Brendan Fraser being tested by the devil. Of course, it's funny, but the message behind what happens at the end is very intriguing when we're talking about the conversation we're talking about. They do mention God and the devil playing chess. The devil, of course, is always cheating, but in the end, God explains to Brendan Fraser's character after he had gone, Brendan Fraser thinks he sold his soul to the devil, basically. And God speaks to him and he's like, honey, that's not your soul. It's my soul that I lent to you. So no, you did not sell your soul to the devil. She's just trying to make you think that. So this is where belief or faith in a higher power, belief in forgiveness, belief in Jesus is important, because it matters if you believe that Jesus has like taken over your sins. And why I bring this up, yeah, someone brought it really good. If you can press this picture. Oh, yeah. We'll go to that link. Someone already kind of explained this little theory in one of the, it's not Reddit, it's a little blog space. Oh, they also bring up this point that in the film, the very first like gift or whatever that Satan gives Brendan Fraser, wish, he had to pay for it. He had to drive to it. It was a burger and a French fries from McDonald's, and the devil did not give it to him for free. And this is a huge, huge learning point. If you call upon things outside of you, they'll let you get it. You're not going to get it for free. So this is a really big turning point that you might forget while you're going into stuff. And whenever you talk about vampires, elves, which I truly believe that vampires are the fallen elves. Whenever you talk about these beings that are not of our dimension, even fairies from Avalon, it's not a matter of if they're good or bad. It really, really is not a matter of that. It's talking to them costs money. They'll get you where you need to go sometimes, but it's at a price. So when you're dealing with
A price I don't know.
and you don't, and it might take years for it to actually kind of happen. So, and then of course, you have to remember or have a idea that your sins, this isn't freely to go and make all the sins you want, but if you are in a scenario, it doesn't matter the sins you have done, your soul is not something that you can just give away to Satan.
Yeah, it's not yours to give away, which is a good point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go back to the Canva. Is there another slide after this? Yes. Yeah, so basically when the baby demon is born, immediately Bella dies because it took everything from her. It was a perfect representation of a parasite. It used her nutrition. It just basically made her into a corpse. The baby's born, and then Bella's immediately like hemorrhaging and dying. So that is when they put venom into a shot. They throw the venom into her heart, and they just start biting her because she's dying, basically. So for 3 days, Bella is going through agony of changing into a vampire, and it hurts, and it's screaming and bad, and I'm not going to call it the same resurrection as Jesus. To me, it is very, very different, but we do have this 3-day Osiris type path, which a lot of Christians do not believe in. Throwing that out there. There's a lot of Christians who are like, we don't have enough information. We do not know that the man taken to the cross was Jesus because he was being so bad. No one could get a positive identification. And you would have to literally trust Pontius Pilate for not doing a switcheroo, which anyone who knows Pontius Pilate, he is like the one person who would do a switcheroo. Like, he was not someone who played by the rules. He was not someone who would listen to the Jewish priests. If he saw something was astray, it's not out of the ordinary to think that he did a switcheroo, because, and we don't know. So a lot of people, I want to throw that out there, a lot of people do believe in the Jesus story up until he was beaten, basically, because we do not have identification that the story of Osiris actually did happen to this man. Remember from Indian law, we learned that swans can make it through the river Styx, or the liminal space between life and death, which is Twilight. And she comes back as a vampire. Okay, really quick, the road not taken. I've always wondered, what if Jacob and Bella had a baby? Obviously, it would not be a Nephilim. It would be more of the Israelite and a Gentile mixture. And as in the Bible, we know that both Gentiles and Israelites will be saved as long as they give their faith to Christ, because you kind of have to believe it to happen in order for it to happen. So this is different than the Nephilim demon baby. And there's a lot of people pretending to be native even today to get special treatment from these covens. And if you don't believe me, look up all Ivy League schools. They do have covens.
Which also goes into why they're being abducted and completely, they're being preyed upon across the country, not just in the Southwest, but across the United States. They're marginalized and they're taken advantage of. One really asks why at a deeper level. It's not just about, oh, people are bad and crooked and they just want to, screw people over. There's more to it than that.
Totally. Quick word on George Carlin, or a quick word tying this all together. If you look this up, fake news and Snopes says George Carlin was stupid, but if you watch him actually talk about this subject, he is very serious. There is no joking in his eyes. There is this stand-up where George Carlin is yelling at all the liberal ideas of don't call Native Americans Indian. And he's like, there was no country, India. At the time, India was called Hindustan. So why they called Native Americans Indians, per George Carlin, these are his words, the word Indian does not derive from Columbus mistakenly leaving to touch India. No, India was Hindustan. More likely, the word Indian comes from Columbus's description of the people he found. He called them Indians, una gente in Dios, the people of God, in Dios, in Dios, in God. So if Stephanie Meyer is saying that these Israelites of Native people were God's children, and apparently Columbus called them God in Dios, that's very interesting that we have that connection. There was a war. This is how the whole series ends. It's the Illuminatis versus the good vampires. We spend the entire fourth book trying to find the vampires that are willing to go against the Illuminati. They're rebels. Some of them are vegan, not all of them. They're just willing to fight with us as the Illuminati. So they're called the Volturi. The Colons rally all over the world to find like 50 different people to fight against. Alice is the Oracle. Her and her man Jasper leave the fight, and they try to find another child like Bella's, who is half vampire, half human, to prove that they're not like Nephilim babies. They're not uncontrollable. They're not going to be a problem for anything, which is what the war is about. The Illuminati ultimately want like all of the Colons under them, but they're using the guise of, well, you have a demon baby, we have to kill it, the rules. And then Alice is like, nope, here's what's going to happen. If we fight, we are all going down. We are going to kill all of you. You're going to kill most of us. No one's going to win. There is a kid that has all the traits of Bella's kid, and he is a normal person. He can live a couple hundred years old. He will eventually die because he is half human. But there's no reason to kill the baby, and there's no reason to start a war, basically, is what happens in this end scene. You can go.
Which is a lot like kind of what's happening now. It's like there's wars happening, there's conflicts happening, whether it's in society or not, they're being fought by false beliefs.
Yes.
It's
just
important to point that out.
It's also important to point out that Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Twilight are all about 15 years apart in their universe, and they're all explaining there's humans and then there's superhumans. And they call the superhumans something different in each world. One calls them wizards and witches, one calls them demigods, one calls them demons, vampires. They all have this weird racist underlying tone where half humans and half hybrid, I don't know what, demigods, which I think demigods are Gentiles, small g gods, small g Gentiles. which there is a Greek goddess Leda who was turned into a swan because it's a whole thing. So I do believe that we are definitely maybe possibly working with these demigods, and that is what these X-Men like children, targeted individuals are kind of like. I do believe they are a mixture of something and Gentiles, which as long as you go to God, they will be saved for the Bible.
All right, so closing revelations here as the saga kind of closes, again, we're just pointing out that there's these liminal crossings between reality and mysticism, and these exist in real life. Like right now, there are blurred lines about what is true, what is false, and kind of everything in between, like we talked about with, what's between 0 and 1. There's a lot that you could really dive into there. That's why it's so important to look at every angle, but you don't have to believe every angle, but you have to at least know that it's there, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on the bigger picture. It's kind of like pixels on a screen, I suppose.
Yeah.
But there's these kind of Gentile Israelite tensions that were shown in the book. Those are real. There's still, we still that kind of persecution of the Israelites persists today, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. I hope it does, but God forbid if you go around saying you're from Israel, or that you stand with Israel, or whatever the case may be nowadays. It's gonna cause.
To be fair, yes, we're not saying that the state of Israel is necessarily the Israel in the Bible.
No.
Making that very clear. The state of Israel has proven itself over and over to be, again, to be not even that. Like, to me, every single nation that has humans has Israelites on it. There's 12 tribes. There's 12 different types of human races. There's blacks, there's the European whites, there's the Asians, and then there's Latinas, and then you have a mixture of all of them. And even if you go to a place like, we have black look like Africans who are from America in our history books, and they never had anyone in their family ever be from Africa. So there are even tribes of humans that we don't understand, and of course they've been killed off and stuff, and history goes usually not telling the story of anyone who has color in their skin, which is another thing. Vampires apparently like dark colored humans to eat because they have more melanin. So that's another possible reason that black and native people are usually stolen, because they have this like sweet blood which has more melanin in it.
Right. So, and again, important theme: you do not own your soul. You cannot sell your soul, even if you could. It belongs to the Lord. It's not yours to give away.
Speaking of Jewish hate crimes, we don't know the full extent of this story. A lot of people have been already coming up with stuff, but the death of Charlie Kirk has been
the murder.
The assassination of Charlie Kirk has happened today. A lot of people are already doing all the conspiracy things that we do with everything, finding holes in the story, but any way you see this is scary. A lot of people are in the community are talking about, oh, well, it was a false flag, it was fake, don't worry. Even if it was, that's even scarier than if it was like something planned. There's a lot of unknown stuff that went along with this assassination. So if it was real, if we did lose a son of God, I pray for his family, and I pray for the people who have to watch his assassination happen over and over. Even if it was stage effects, that's still going to hurt people. Like, that still causes a visceral reaction in people. That still causes trauma. This is why video games and movies that show killing in certain ways, and there's a lot of horror genre video games that is just trying to get this our adrenals to freak out. So yeah, bless all the people who have to be a part of this assassination attempt, and bless all the people who are doing what Charlie Kirk is doing, spreading truth out in the open. They need to be protected. They are the victims.
Yeah. without, again, you know, we can't say it enough. Either you believe or you don't believe. These things are, they do exist, and you owe it to yourself to be able to look at all of it. Maybe not all at once. You know, you don't have to subscribe to everything, but you should at least recognize it. And if you don't, you're just leaving out too much, and you're almost, you know, you could be disrespecting the people who do, who have gone through this and suffered. I mean, what would you say to Charlie's wife? You know, that he died in vain, or that it was, you know, all fake, and that it's all, you know, trust the plan, maybe. But there's just too much going on. So this happened while we were planning to film this today. You know, whenever you're listening or watching to this, you know, we dedicate it to Charlie Kirk, and we pray for his family.
Definitely. One last piece outgoing, which we did not really mention during all of this. We literally talked about a 108-year-old pedophilic vampire who fucks a 18-year-old. Oh, sorry, but he fell in love with her when she was 16. Horrible. We talk about a mother who abandons her 16-year-old to live in vampire land to go with Phil. We even talk about the Volturi, which is like the Illuminati. And guess what? They are not even the worst person in this whole saga. Public enemy number one, Carlisle Cullen. Why is this guy just going around changing humans into vampires? Basically, all of his kids he's a doctor. These beautiful children were dying, and at the very last, right before death, he changes them. He steals their passage to God away from them. They did not have a choice about it in most of, I think, all of the scenarios. He bit people who were dying, and then he tells you, by the way, I know that's her. That's the guy. It's a whole thing. So, and then he says, "Hey, I changed you into a vampire, but you can't eat the thing that you want to eat." So it's like even worse fate than just like even becoming a vampire. I don't think people should drink blood. Vampires should drink blood, but like, dude, this guy's insane. Oh my God. Carlisle is not a good guy. He is the worst person in the show. I just wanted to throw that out there.
He's kind of a weirdo. I mean, who would go to someone who's dying and just be like, hey, I'm going to make you into a vampire, and it's going to be really bad, and you're never going to like it. You never get to have any sort of nourishment, and I'm just going to curse you forever. They
didn't even do that in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. They like ask people, do you want to change so you can fight the war forever? Which
what
is why I know. Fucking loser. Oh, so
we don't get censored for that.
It's fine. Oh, we're not. It's Rumble. I'll sue their ass.
Public enemy number one, Carlisle.
All right. The end.